The FarmCast is a podcast sponsored by the Maryland Pharmacists Association. I'm your host, Aaliyah Horton. I'm the Executive Director of MPHA. And in my role, I have the opportunity to meet so many fascinating people within Maryland and around the country that are engaged in the practice of pharmacy. They're stakeholders, they're innovators, collaborators, and advocates. And this is my opportunity to bring those conversations and experiences to you. And it's another way that MPHA is fulfilling its mission to strengthen the profession of pharmacy, advocate for pharmacists, and to promote excellence in pharmacy practice. My hope is that at the end of these conversations, you will leave informed, engaged, and connected to pharmacy and our Maryland pharmacy community. Welcome to the FarmCast. Today, my guest is Mike Weison, and Mike currently serves as the CEO of CARE Pharmacies. And during his tenure, CARE Pharmacies has experienced amazing growth and has been named the Hot 100 retailer of the National Federation, National Retail Federation, 5 out of the last 6 years, and has grown to more than 120 locations in 23 states. CARE Pharmacies is considered the 18th largest drug chain in the U.S. It's early. I've only had one cup of coffee. So the 18th largest drug chain in the U.S. Mike has been honored as one of the top executive leaders influencing specialty pharmacy and currently sits on the NACDS board of directors, which I just actually learned. So congrats on that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Mike has more than 25 years of experience in healthcare and the pharmaceutical industries, having held leadership positions for companies like Cardinal Health, AmerisourceBergen, Baxter Healthcare. He's a graduate of the Virginia Military Institute and is married with 7 children. And that part is a whole nother episode for a different podcast. But thank you for being here. It's always great to talk to you.
It's my pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to spend a little time with you here.
Awesome. So I was thinking there are several reasons why I wanted to talk to you. One, I just love our conversations. I really do enjoy them in general. But I remember, I guess it was 2 to 3 years ago, I'll call it BC, before Corona, we went to lunch and we really had a great conversation about leadership and engagement. And we were taking notes, and I actually still have the envelope you wrote on. And I remember you mentioned 3 points. And the one, I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head, but one was you had this concept of esprit de corps. And I did want you to talk a little bit about that and your kind of philosophy on leadership, because obviously you've got the stats to back up your leadership and the changes that you've made with CARE Pharmacies. But yeah, just talk a little bit about that, and we'll get into some other things I wanted to talk to you about as well.
Yeah, so from our lunch and the time we've spent together, I'm kind of a leadership nerd. I love the idea of people working in groups in good faith. And esprit de corps to me is really just the culmination that comes from people, all working collectively for the betterment of other people. And esprit de corps, I think, is interesting. I'm not sure quite how Webster might define it, but to me, it's when you have it, you know it, and when you don't. And I learned a lot of that, ironically enough, when I went to VMI. I was never really a military guy or really high speed, but when I got there, I really began to understand and appreciate what happens when you put groups of people together that are like-minded and have this fun, this foundational level of trust. And so I set off on a journey to really understand how to build that level of trust with my customers and my colleagues and all the people that were, somewhat connected to me as they were moving, I always say, from point A to point B, assuming point B is some more favorable place than where you are today. And I think if you think about it in that regard, and you can liberate the people around you to be the people that they're obligated to be, and you can take the unique experiences that they have and the gifts that they've been given and use those collectively in the service of other people, then then the kind of results that you highlighted in the super gratuitous introduction here are all possible, even from somebody like me in an organization like CARE Pharmacies. And so the leadership pieces of that and the perspective of that have all been honed, I think, over the course of my time and the experiences that I've had.
And what I also find is that oh, I got a little feedback. What I also find interesting is that you are not a pharmacist and not a healthcare professional, but your career has been in kind of healthcare management and, I guess, sales and marketing. So how did you get there?
So I'm actually an oil painter. I actually wanted to go to art school. I actually didn't want to go to military school at all. If I could figure out how to earn a living oil painting and watercoloring and doing
Etsy.
Yeah, if I could figure out how to do that and feed my 7 children, that'd be great for me. But again, I think looking retrospectively, I have the benefit of being old enough now to do that. Like I said, BMI wasn't really at the top of my list, but when I thought about that, I said, man, the ability to follow directions, the ability to do the little things that most people won't do, get up, make your bed, shine your shoes, put your uniform on, do that. I think retrospectively, those were the pieces that were the hardest for me. And when I could figure out how to do that, then some of the creative components that are meaningful to me became an asset further on down the line, and my ability to work in good faith with other people, allowed me to solve bigger problems with a larger group of people. So, and like I said, I think we all have a philosophy that we carry with us based on where we come from and how we were raised, and over the course of the experiences that you have, you're able to kind of refine that philosophy based on good things and bad things that happen to you. Like I said, at this point, what I'm trying to figure out how to do, and I love community pharmacy because I think it encompasses all of those attributes, is figuring out how to try to make sure that CARE Pharmacies and the member owners that comprise our membership are also serving their customers in the biggest, largest, and most impactful way possible.
That's great. And just speaking of CARE Pharmacies, as I mentioned in the bio, it is a national company, but it is headquartered in Maryland. And I think it's great that you often have members of the Maryland Pharmacists Association on your board. And so just the support that CARE Pharmacies has given MPHA and recognizing the leaders here in Maryland has been really great. So appreciate that connection on lots of different levels.
Well, I think the two organizations share a kindred spirit there. We're all trying to do the same general thing, which is to improve the outcomes, the health outcomes of the people in the communities that we serve. Our organization is rooted in many of these communities, and I won't rattle off the stats about how trusted pharmacy is, but we see that proven every day. And the history and the story of CARE far precedes me, all the way back to 1960 when it was Circle Drug. I think I just happened to come along at the right time as the organization was on its way up and still trying to figure out what it wanted to be. I'd like to think I just maybe helped nudge that along a little bit. Our headquartered here in Maryland, we have a large number of stores here as one of our sister organizations does. And we've seen that growth and the demand for some of the things that we're doing stretch out. We now have stores in 23 states. So I think, when you look at that, you look at the pretty significant growth that we've experienced. I think in some regards, that's got to make you think you've got the philosophy right, or at least you have, the right people engaged in the right kinds of partnerships.
Yeah, and speaking on that, just for everybody that doesn't know, because we have a lot of these different groups. We've got buying groups, we've got co-ops, we've got all different sorts of things. Can you tell us a little bit about CARE? Because I believe let me not put the definition on it. You tell us.
Yeah, no. I think that's a good question. I tell people, if you're like I am and you have attention deficit disorder, this is the place to be working, because there's always something happening and always something going on. And if you look at it, I always describe it, right, as a military guy, a terrain to navigate through. And there are all these entities navigating in different manners and in different ways throughout that terrain. You know, you have the payers, you have providers, you have GPOs, you have buying groups, you have wholesalers, manufacturers. So for me, it's almost like a composition on a painting. Everything has its place on the canvas. You just have to know where that place is. And once you do, you literally can stand back from it and understand it. And in your brain, you look at it and go, okay, I now know how all of this comes together. So CARE in its essence started as an aggregation of like-minded community-based pharmacies all the way back in the 60s. It saw some intrinsic value of partnering together and working in good faith. There was this premise that if they got together, they would be able to go out and negotiate more favorable agreements with providers. They would be able to franchise and create a strong brand and a presence here in the Mid-Atlantic. And I think by and large, they were pretty successful at that. In 2010, when I came to CARE, you know, I brought with me wholesaling backgrounds and pedigrees and just kind of a different way of looking at it as a non-practicing, not a physician or a pharmacist. And I said, hey, you know, this group in its essence is a retail chain. It wants to move and operate like a chain. So we have to figure out how to cater to the inherent uniqueness of the community pharmacy, but then take advantage of working and moving much like our chains do. And from my experience at Cardinal and ABC, I think there are some advantages of being able to drive continuity of care, but also being able to exploit what I think is a very critical advantage for community pharmacy, which is that interaction that exists between the patients and the pharmacy. And so I think we've been pretty good at that. I know there's places where we would like to, you know, improve upon that, but I think there aren't many providers that are positioned quite like CARE. I think you have other regional buying groups that we'll bump into and work with, and then you have other regional chains, but I'm not aware of really any other group that's attempted to take retail community specialty pharmacies, brand it as the drug chain, and then work directly with manufacturers and kind of move back and cross the continuum that exists today in classes of trade.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. Are you guys also a co-op? Like, do they have some ownership? I thought there was some little tweak that was a little bit different.
Yeah, so we are definitely a co-op. We haven't always been a co-op, but you know, one of the things that we tripped along across, you know, as we were moving to point B in our evolution, which is now the next point A, was that we really wanted to make sure that our stores were advantaged financially as they begin to experience declining reimbursement. And so we operate CARE Pharmacies in the spirit of a franchise, but in essence, it is a cooperative, which makes all of our member pharmacies owner of the organization. And I like that. It creates a level of transparency and I think really eliminates or mitigates the potential of confusing what you're doing with why you're doing it.
Yeah, everybody's got a little skin in the game, up or down.
Yeah, I have 125 bosses. You know, the fun for me is making sure that all their experiences match their expectations, because the range of expectations is quite a thing.
I understand that.
I bet you do. Yes, you do. So you have all the classes of trade and all the pharmacies within the state. So if anybody is empathetic to that, I would assume it would be you.
I do understand that. And speaking of that, you know, when we're looking at what's going on with COVID and, you know, a lot of the payment issues, how are you navigating that? Because with MPHA, like you mentioned, we have lots of different, we have members from lots of different practice settings, and some are soaring, others are challenged just because of the practice environments, because of the reimbursements. And so how do you manage those expectations on a regular day?
Yeah.
And then you throw in COVID and you throw in whatever else, whatever other catastrophe is going on in the world.
Well, so I always like to say a lot can be true all at the same time.
Mhm.
And I think if you look at some of the systemic issues that pharmacy has been confronted with, or at least in my short time, working in the sector at CARE, it's funny. I was fortunate enough to do the address, the regional address at NECDS right before the coronavirus. And the only reason I say that is, I didn't know that that was coming. And at the time when I gave the address, I went back to my first year at CARE to look at what all the hot topics were in the industry. And the funny part about it was the only thing that had changed on the slides was the location and the date of the meeting.
Yeah.
So the payer issues, the declining reimbursement, the DIRs, those have all been kind of lingering issues for quite some period of time. I think you're just at a critical point where they've all started to reach a critical mass collectively. The coronavirus, to me, is super fascinating because it proves, I think, one of the most important concepts, not only in pharmacy, but just in general, which is how connected actually everything is. Look at the impact that happened over the last year and how fast all of that spread around, and the economic, impact and the social impacts of that.
Mhm.
And so, it wasn't kind of bad, it was real bad. And so I subscribe to the same general notion that if it could be good, then it could be real good.
Mm.
And so what we try to do at CARE is to just kind of take everything a step at a time, make sure that the stores are appropriately positioned, at least on the coronavirus, to provide the level of service and the critical care that we know that our stores can provide. I think the coronavirus has only exacerbated, I think, a fundamental understanding of how important pharmacy is in the healthcare space, the important role that these community pharmacies play, and how interconnected it all really is, even when you try to isolate it or look at it in individual segments.
Yes, and that is so true. And we're closing out on our legislative session, and some of our, I don't want to say distractors, that's not the right word, but we often have to battle up against the practitioners as we're looking to advance scope of practice and other things. And we're taking some of what has happened over the last year with coronavirus and seeing where we have some flaws in the system, and where pharmacies have been open the entire time. Pharmacists have been working the entire time to say, look, we've got this steady presence, these steady healthcare providers that aren't going to close. Physicians' offices were closing, all these other places were closing. You've got pharmacies and emergency rooms open. And saying, look, we've provided these services under these emergency orders, but these can go on. And we get a lot of pushback on that, even with trying to push for, which we got through it, as with anything, all good bills go amended. So we were able to get through some staying power and some studies for pharmacists in Maryland to continue to do pediatric immunizations. But I keep thinking in my head, a lot of the pushback was, oh, they're not going to, if pharmacists are doing this one service, they're not going to go to physicians. And my feeling is that if physicians, you have more to offer than immunizations. And so pharmacists providing the immunizations means, and vaccinations means, that the patients aren't going to go to their wellness visits and do other things. And that means you guys need to step it up too. So I think it's a collective stepping up and sort of reckoning of what people can do and what they should be doing and what they could be doing to fill healthcare gaps. And so I like what you're saying, is that if it's bad, like how much better things could be if we all kind of worked at the full potential and scope of where we should be.
I think that's exactly right. And all I can do is speak to the experience that I've had in the pharmacies, and I've been in thousands of community pharmacies. When I walk in, it's that esprit de corps.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel that.
Yeah.
These pharmacies have operated in a 100-year pandemic, and they're a gift to the spirit. I'm not kidding. When you walk in, you can feel the esprit de corps. Many of them are doing what they think they are clinically obligated to do, which is to go out and treat some of the most underserved, underprivileged people in the communities that they happen to be located in. And I don't think there's anybody better positioned to do that than community retail and specialty pharmacies. I mean, that's just a fact. And I can tell you that if you look at this and take a step back from it, I think some of these expansions of services and some of these disease state management opportunities that exist past traditional pharmacy, I think you're going to see that too. There's so many people that need treatment. There's so many people that are dealing with adverse health consequences and impacts. I don't think anybody's better positioned to bridge those gaps in the continuum of health than community pharmacy. Yeah. And you can see it.
Absolutely, from your lips to God's ears. that is the work that we are that we are doing in Annapolis. We got some good wins this session, actually.
And I think the other thing that the coronavirus has done, and again, at least from my perspective, is it has exposed where the vulnerability and the unsustainable costs of healthcare actually lay, right? Mm-hmm. It's in the underserved communities from folks that either don't have access to providers or don't have the financial wherewithal or the education to really appropriately manage some of their own health issues.
Yep.
And I think community pharmacies have that direct line to those potential, vulnerable patients and are best positioned to address those needs.
100%. Wow, that was really impactful. I was going to ask you something else, but I think we hit it on the nail there. In your company, one of the things that I do like to talk about when in these conversations is for pharmacists, as you know, we have a lot of pharmacists in the marketplace, and looking at other places where they can use their expertise in service. And so I know that you do employ pharmacists. They're not doing traditional dispensing roles. And so what do you see as other opportunities, and what advice would you give for new practitioners and students that are coming out of pharmacy school that are feeling challenged with finding the work that they thought they were going to get? I think they have a lot to offer in lots of different places, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You know what? I love that question, and I love that question because I don't think it's just I know we're talking about pharmacy today, but I think that's a general issue that most people are struggling with. I do a lot with folks that are transitioning out of the military that are looking to move back into the private sector. And so, we partnered up with a lot of local pharmacy schools, and you have young pharmacists that are coming out trying to figure out what roles they would like to accept. And I see the same patterns of behavior and the same underlying issue, which is most of the people that gravitate to pharmacy gravitate because they have some inherent need to want to fix or serve other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they didn't end up in pharmacy really by accident. And I'm sure there are examples where that's happened, but by and large, people that gravitate to healthcare are empathetic folks that want to help their colleagues and their neighbors and the people around them to live better lives, right? So it's the same in the military. The folks that are coming out also want to serve. They're organizers of chaos. In the pharmacy, it just happens to be health chaos. Mm-hmm. And so then the question then begins with, well, what kind of chaos are we organizing, right? Are we organizing it at the counter when we're filling a prescription? Are we organizing that chaos in a phase 3 clinical trial in a lab somewhere? Are we organizing that as a manufacturer rep going around and educating prescribers? And so there are so many pathways up the pharmacy mountain. It doesn't all begin and end at the counter. Mm-hmm. And so from my limited perspective on it, when I'm either mentoring or come across somebody that is being intellectually honest about, hey, here's where I am, it's almost like trying to help your kids figure out where to go to college. there's a lot of colleges, right? There's big ones and small ones and liberal arts and all of that. And I think, our obligation as an employer is to reach back and help whoever it is that has a genuine interest in, to your point, making things not kind of better, but way better, finding roles in the fields that help them organize the kind of chaos that's really meaningful for them. And when they find that meaning, then guess what happens?
Good things happen.
Really good things happen
Yeah.
when people are waking up and they're not wasting their time, but they're waking up and going, man, I love what I do because I know it's impactful.
Mhm.
And I think that is the esprit de corps that we're talking about, because you can feel that, when you're doing something that's worthy of your time and your asset, right?
It feels different for sure.
It feels right.
Yes.
And it feels like you're leaving it better. And it doesn't feel like you're wasting your time.
Hmm. I felt that.
I felt it too. But look, I know that might sound a little heavy, but
No.
I think it's we have the same obligation for our member owners, which is helping them figure out the kinds of pharmacy they want to practice based on the kind of customers that are walking in. We have an obligation to the employees at CARE Pharmacies to make sure that we're using their innate gifts in the service of our member owners, that the partnerships that we form are based on a layer of trust in good faith, and that we are doing everything we can as an organization, as a team, and as a provider to leave things better than when we got it. And I think that is a very compelling proposition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. This has been a really amazing conversation. Like I feel pumped up, and it's
Are
Friday.
you ready to take the hill? Are you ready?
I'm ready. So let's see. What else did I want to talk about? Well, one of the things, because I do want to talk about also looking at another kind of workplace issue, but more in the profession. Well, actually, no, this is really anybody, as wellness. So I usually ask a question at the end about wellness and what you do. Now, one thing, I don't know if you're still doing it. I do know about the race car driving, and I don't know if that's like wellness or just crazy, but what do you do for your personal wellness to kind of keep on balance and keep your esprit de corps from a personal perspective?
Well, I appreciate that. I will tell you, my biggest weakness is balance. So if you have it and you can tell me how to get it, I'm all ears for that. Obviously with 7 children, we're busy running around to college soccer games and high school games and all of that. Personally, I try to take, time during the day, even if it's 45 minutes or an hour, just to do something, either walk the dog or, find a little workout time. I still try to do P90X for like the 800th time.
Insanity.
Exactly.
I've started Insanity.
The problem I have is that my knees from all my wrestling are don't like that. So I have to find things that agree with my aging body. But I think staying active is important. Like I said, I think my attention deficit disorder probably has a lot to do with, where and how I spend my time. I love working in the yard. I love landscaping, hardscaping. I love oil painting, all of those things, but pretty active in terms of just keeping up with all the children.
Okay. And I have to go down this line with the oil painting. Like that was one that I was not expecting to hear from you when you mentioned it earlier. So what do you do? Do you paint landscapes, people, just kind of whatever abstracts, whatever the mood hits? Or what?
So I am a Fauvist and an Impressionist. So the Fauvists were the precursors to the Impressionists.
Mhm.
I love Vincent van Gogh. He was my hero.
Okay.
So my oldest son, his first name is actually Vincent, after my love and admiration for Vincent van Gogh.
Okay.
So most of the paintings that I have would all look like from that time period. So it's a lot of flowers, boats, happy, bright things. So I love that. Like I said, I wish if I could figure out how to have made a living doing oil painting and be left alone. I think I'm going to be hopefully the 85-year-old guy up at the art studio with the long hair and the brushes and all the paints.
I'll get you a little hairband so you could do like your Willie Nelson twist.
I may need some hair, but you get the idea.
Okay. But that's cool. Yeah. I think everybody's trying. I think this time has given everybody some perspective about time and like what you're here for, and just being grateful that you are still among the walking with so much going on. And so I think you do really have to take a step back and try to find some things that you do enjoy to give you some peace. And if it's just a walk on the sidewalk, do whatever you have to do.
Well, I will tell you this. I'll give you a little nugget. The coronavirus, aside from just the impact to everybody, personally speaking, I learned an important lesson in all of this sitting home. And I know you might think, well, if you can stay home with 7 kids for a year, there's not too much you can't do. But what I learned is that I tend to be on the go. Meaning to me is trying to organize as much chaos as I can. And sometimes you have to take a step back from some of that, because the desire and the need to leave things better sometimes actually keeps you from being better, because you're so out of balance. Or you're blinded by the very thing that's moving you to want to lead, and have an impactful life and find meaning. So coronavirus in that regard has actually been good for me in terms of making sure that there isn't one thing that really is ultimately at the expense of something else in my life. So it's actually had a positive impact in terms of that.
Yeah, I can say the same, and I'm very happy to say I still like everybody in my house. So.
Well, I could say I like just about everybody in mine, Aaliyah.
Then we're all good. Then we're all good. All right. Well, Mike, it was really great talking to you and catching up. And I do hope that we'll be out of this soon. And congrats on joining the NACDS board. I know that you'll have a real impact there, and I think it's actually really, really important. I'm glad to hear that you're going to be there to really have a voice for from a community, from an independent community perspective with them. And so I look forward to seeing what that impact will be in the messaging coming from NACDS. And that's exciting. So I think we have reached our time. And I do hope that I'll get to see you at some important person sometime soon.
I hope so. It'll be nice to see you in person. I certainly appreciated the opportunity and offer to spend a few minutes with you here this morning. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Thank you for listening to the FarmCast. And Steve, do you want to shout out your Twitter handle and LinkedIn? I know you're on there. I see you every once in a while on there. I'm not very active on Twitter, but if you want to shout out any of your social media.
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is capital M, capital W, so Weysong55.
All right. Okay, so follow him there. I know he's got some fun stuff, his travels around, and I think some sporting events here and there.
Here or there.
Yeah. Okay, well, have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching, and please be sure to like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on all major podcast platforms. We look forward to dropping more great conversations, and of course, sponsorship opportunities are available. Just contact us at MPHA. Thanks.